In the opening moments of this powerful story, Jessica Walker, a black pilot, is denied entry to the cockpit of her plane, an action that sets the stage for a profound revelation. In a dramatic twist, Jessica soon grounds the entire airline after exposing critical safety violations, sparking an investigation into the company's practices. This moment marks the beginning of a larger story of resilience, courage, and moral duty. From the very start, it is clear that Jessica is no ordinary pilot. Skylink Airlines, a growing carrier, was supposed to be her opportunity to prove her worth and take one step closer to her dreams. Instead, her journey to the cockpit is met with resistance. When she is prevented from entering the cockpit by the captain, a moment of tension unfolds. The captain, skeptical of her place, takes issue with her very presence. Jessica is confronted by a subtle but pervasive form of discrimination, a reminder that for many black individuals, even achieving great success does not shield them from prejudice. However, rather than allowing this moment to deter her, Jessica makes a pivotal decision. She does not simply let the incident slide. Instead, she takes immediate action, exposing serious violations within the airline's operations. Her swift move to report these issues highlights her sense of duty and commitment to safety. Unbeknownst to the airline's leadership, Jessica's refusal to be silenced becomes a catalyst for uncovering a pattern of neglect and cost-cutting measures that endanger the lives of passengers. Her actions lead to a deep dive into Skylink's internal practices, sparking the beginning of an investigation that will unravel much more than anyone anticipated. This part of the story sets the tone for Jessica's character: strong, determined, and unwilling to let injustice go unchecked. It also establishes a theme that will be central throughout the narrative: how systemic biases and corporate interests can sometimes put safety and fairness at risk. The challenge is not only overcoming personal discrimination but also exposing a culture that has allowed such problems to persist. Jessica Walker's journey toward becoming a pilot didn't start with a silver spoon. Born and raised in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of a bustling city, she grew up in a world shaped by both the dreams of aviation and the struggles of daily life. The sound of planes roaring overhead was a constant reminder of a future that seemed out of reach, yet one that she felt inexplicably drawn to. From the time she was a young girl, Jessica would watch the planes take off from the nearby airport, her eyes wide with wonder as they cut through the sky. It was in those moments that the seed of ambition was planted. She knew she wanted to be in control of those sleek, metal birds soaring high above the clouds. Her grandmother, a hard-working nurse who had been involved in civil rights protests in the past, was one of the few people who saw the potential in Jessica's dreams. The old woman recognized her granddaughter's fascination with flight early on and was determined to nurture it. Each time Jessica would press her face against the fence at the airport, her grandmother would stand beside her, offering words of encouragement that resonated deeply. "A new generation must carry forward old dreams," she would whisper. These simple yet powerful words became a guiding force for Jessica, reminding her that her goals were more than just personal, they were part of something larger, something deeply rooted in a legacy of resilience and activism. Jessica's father, on the other hand, was rarely in the picture. He had left to pursue various odd jobs in other states, often promising to return but never truly staying. Her mother, a dedicated and loving woman, worked tirelessly at 2 jobs to keep the family afloat. It was through her mother's sacrifices that Jessica learned the value of hard work and determination. However, for Jessica, the notion of flight became something more than just a career path. It symbolized freedom, an escape from the limitations of her environment. In school, Jessica excelled in math and science, pushing herself relentlessly to meet the academic requirements for aviation scholarships. Despite being the only black girl in her high school's small aviation club, where her presence often raised eyebrows, Jessica pressed on, undeterred by the doubts of others. "She'll move on to something else soon," some of the parents would say, dismissing her passion as a phase. But these doubts, though constant, did not stop her. Instead, they became the background hum to her perseverance, a hum she refused to let drown out her dreams. Through sheer determination, Jessica secured a scholarship to attend an aeronautical university, where her journey truly began. Yet, even there, she faced resistance, often feeling like an outsider in a field that still struggled with issues of race and inclusion. Nonetheless, she carried herself with pride and remained laser-focused on her ultimate goal, soaring in the sky as a pilot, defying the odds stacked against her. After securing a scholarship to an aeronautical university, Jessica Walker's journey into the world of aviation became both exhilarating and daunting. It was a new chapter in her life, filled with excitement and the weight of expectations. When she first stepped into the university's flight training program, the reality of being one of the few women, and the only black woman, became painfully clear. The feeling of being outnumbered, of standing alone in a sea of unfamiliar faces, was hard to shake. Many of her peers didn't look like her, and sometimes the whispers and subtle glances made her wonder if she truly belonged in a space dominated by others. Jessica's resolve was tested by the skepticism she encountered. She overheard remarks from other students and even some faculty members questioning her abilities. "She's just here to fill a quota," they would mutter, dismissing her passion and talent as something temporary. These doubts, however, only fueled her determination. She was determined to prove that she wasn't there to satisfy anyone's expectations but her own. Her early days in flight school were grueling. She spent hours studying aerodynamics, navigation charts, and aircraft mechanics, pushing herself beyond what was required. Late nights in the library and flight simulators became routine, her eyes burning from exhaustion. Yet, through it all, she never wavered. The words her grandmother had whispered to her, "A new generation must carry forward old dreams," echoed in her mind, reminding her that her pursuit wasn't just for herself. She was honoring a legacy that had fought for opportunities she was now seizing. As she progressed through the program, Jessica caught the attention of several instructors. One, Ethan Delgado, stood out in particular. He was kind but tough, focused on her skill and potential rather than any preconceived notions about who she was. "You have a natural feel for the yoke," Ethan told her after her first practice landing. His belief in her abilities became a powerful motivator, and his words became a mantra that she would carry with her for years to come. Despite her mother's continuous worry about the dangers of aviation, sending Jessica texts filled with concerns about everything from weather to mechanical issues, Jessica remained steadfast in her goals. She understood that her mother's fears came from a place of love, but she also recognized that her own path had to be forged by her choices, not by the fear of what might go wrong. With the support of her grandmother and the encouragement of those who believed in her, Jessica completed her training and set her sights on the future, determined to break through every barrier placed in her way. She was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. After years of rigorous training and preparation, Jessica Walker finally landed her first official position as a first officer with Skylink Airlines, a rising carrier with ambitions to serve underserved communities. It was a dream come true, yet Jessica quickly realized that the challenges she faced during her training were only the beginning. The true test of her resilience would come when she stepped into the cockpit and faced the harsh realities of working in a male-dominated, racially biased industry. From the very first day, Jessica encountered resistance. Her new colleagues, particularly Captain Martin Harlow, were clearly uncomfortable with her presence. While the airline's policies were progressive on paper, the internal culture told a different story. Captain Harlow, an experienced pilot, made it clear that he viewed Jessica's presence as an intrusion. His cold demeanor and barely concealed hostility were apparent the moment she entered the cockpit. "Stay in your lane," he muttered on their first flight, insinuating that she was not deserving of her position. The underlying message was clear: she was there to fulfill a role, but not truly to belong. Jessica, determined not to let his animosity interfere with her career, kept her composure. She was professional, precise, and focused on doing her job to the best of her ability. Yet, no matter how diligently she performed her tasks, she could feel the weight of his disapproval. The subtle, but constant undermining made every shift feel like a battle. The tension was palpable, especially during flights when Captain Harlow's dismissive attitude seemed to grow stronger. However, Jessica knew that complaining or voicing her frustrations might confirm the very stereotypes that others might hold about her. She feared that speaking up could make her appear weak, or worse, prove that she wasn't cut out for this line of work. But as the days passed, the internal conflict grew stronger. Should she confront the issue, or should she continue to push forward, hoping her skills would eventually win respect? Despite the mounting stress, Jessica was unwilling to let Captain Harlow's disdain define her. She continued to focus on her mission to prove herself, not just to him, but to the world. Every challenge, every dismissal, became fuel for her determination to rise above the prejudice she faced. She had come too far to let negativity take away her dreams. And in the end, she knew that her skills and integrity would be her greatest assets in a world that wasn't always welcoming to someone like her. As Jessica Walker continued her career with Skylink Airlines, she began to notice troubling patterns that couldn't be ignored. While the airline was expanding its routes and gaining recognition, Jessica, now an experienced first officer, started to observe a disturbing trend of frequent maintenance delays and rumors of cost-cutting measures that jeopardized passenger safety. It all started with small signs, delayed flights, hasty inspections, and a growing sense among the staff that the airline was more focused on its bottom line than on ensuring that the planes were properly maintained. As Jessica spent more time with mechanics, flight attendants, and other flight crew, she began hearing whispers of rushed inspections and skipped safety checks. Many of her colleagues spoke in hushed tones, afraid to speak out directly but voicing their concerns behind closed doors. Some were fearful of repercussions, while others were simply too frustrated to remain silent any longer. Jessica's own instincts began to stir as well. Her training had instilled in her an unwavering sense of responsibility for the safety of her passengers and crew. She couldn't ignore the feeling that something was wrong. The internal corporate pressure to meet tight schedules seemed to be overriding the proper protocols for ensuring that planes were in safe flying condition. The more she heard, the more concerned she became, and soon, Jessica began quietly gathering information. She spoke with mechanics about the rushed repairs and overheard snippets of conversations about deadlines that felt more important than safety inspections. Her suspicions deepened after overhearing a conversation between some of the ground staff about how maintenance issues were sometimes deliberately overlooked in order to keep planes on schedule. It became clear that Skylink's management had instituted cost-cutting measures that compromised the airline standards and put passengers at risk. Jessica knew she couldn't ignore the situation any longer. Her own ethics and sense of responsibility couldn't allow her to turn a blind eye to what was unfolding. But confronting such an issue was a daunting prospect, especially in an industry that often prioritized profits over people's lives. Still, she felt a strong moral obligation to act, especially after remembering the words her mentor, Ethan Delgado, had shared with her: "Doing the right thing in aviation is never optional. It's mandatory." Jessica began to discreetly document the lapses in safety she had witnessed, preparing herself for the inevitable confrontation that would come. Her determination to protect passengers and her crew from harm had become stronger than ever, and she was ready to speak up, no matter the cost. She knew that in doing so, she might risk her career, but the consequences of remaining silent seemed far worse. One morning, Jessica Walker was assigned to a crucial flight from Skylink Airline's New York hub to Los Angeles. This was a high-profile route, vital to the airline's expanding reputation and operations. As she went through her pre-flight checks, Jessica's experienced eye caught a subtle but concerning discrepancy in the aircraft's engine readings. The readings were slightly off, not enough to cause immediate alarm, but enough to warrant further inspection before departure. Given the long flight ahead, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She immediately brought the issue to Captain Thomas Kane, who was supposed to be in command of the flight. He dismissed her concerns, assuring her that everything was within acceptable limits and that the flight could proceed as planned. His response didn't sit right with Jessica. Every instinct in her body told her that pressing the matter was not just important, it was necessary. As the first officer, she had an obligation to ensure that everything was properly checked and documented, no matter the inconvenience it might cause to the airline's strict schedules. Despite the captain's dismissive attitude, Jessica stood firm. "I'm not questioning your judgment, Captain, but I believe we need to get a sign-off from maintenance before we proceed," she insisted, her voice calm but resolute. She knew that pushing for an inspection would delay the flight, but the potential consequences of ignoring a safety issue were far greater. Captain Kane begrudgingly agreed, though his frustration was palpable. "Fine," he snapped. "But if this turns into a delay, it's on your record." The maintenance team quickly went over the aircraft, and after some tense moments, they gave the plane a thorough inspection. Everything checked out, and the flight was cleared to go. However, when the plane took off, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that something still wasn't quite right. Mid-flight, after a few hours in the air, her suspicions were confirmed. The engine issue, while minor, was exacerbated by the flight's conditions, and a more significant problem emerged. Jessica made the decision to divert the flight to a nearby major airport. The landing was tense, but it was successful, and emergency services were waiting to ensure the safety of everyone on board. All passengers were evacuated without incident. The media quickly caught wind of the unscheduled emergency landing, and soon the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, launched an investigation. Jessica's decision to call for the emergency landing and expose the safety concerns set off a chain reaction. The FAA would now probe deeper into Skylink Airline's practices, uncovering potential safety violations that had been brushed aside for the sake of efficiency and profit. Jessica, though exhausted, knew that she had done the right thing. Her actions had saved lives that day, but they also exposed the cracks in an airline more concerned with its schedule than with the well-being of its passengers. She now found herself at the center of an investigation that would not only put Skylink in the spotlight but also force the entire aviation industry to re-examine its priorities. Jessica Walker knew that exposing the safety violations at Skylink Airlines wouldn't be easy, but she never imagined the full extent of the backlash she would face. Despite her actions saving lives, her decision to report the issue triggered a wave of resistance from both her colleagues and the airline's management. As the news of the emergency landing and the FAA investigation spread, Jessica became the target of criticism. Many of her fellow pilots and crew members were outraged, and some felt she had made their jobs harder by calling attention to Skylink's shortcomings. Captain Martin Harlow, who had always been critical of Jessica from the start, saw her actions as a direct challenge to his authority. His disdain grew, and he began to openly question her integrity, accusing her of being overly cautious and risking the reputation of the airline. "You've made a mountain out of a molehill," he sneered one afternoon when they crossed paths. His words stung, but Jessica had become accustomed to the subtle and overt hostility she faced from some of her colleagues. She knew this battle wasn't just about safety, it was about survival in an industry where her every move was scrutinized, especially as a black woman. At the same time, Skylink's management took a hard stance, trying to discredit her and downplay the severity of the issues she had uncovered. Behind closed doors, they attempted to minimize the investigation, eager to avoid any damage to their public image. Jessica was called into several meetings where she was pressured to retract her claims or at least soften the impact of her findings. Her supervisors implied that her actions could tarnish the airline's reputation, and some even suggested that she might have been too hasty in her decision-making. But Jessica was resolute. She had already risked her career by standing up for what she believed in, and there was no turning back. Her moral compass was clear. She had a duty to ensure that the airline operated safely, no matter the consequences. She continued to document every irregularity she encountered, quietly gathering evidence while maintaining her professionalism. In a private conversation with Ethan Delgado, her former instructor, he reaffirmed her commitment to doing what was right. "Don't let them wear you down," he told her. "You're on the right side of history." Jessica knew that exposing these violations would make her a target, but it was a risk she was willing to take. Every conversation she had, every piece of evidence she collected, brought her one step closer to ensuring that Skylink's safety practices were investigated thoroughly. The mounting pressure from the airline and her colleagues only strengthened her resolve to continue the fight, no matter what it cost her personally. She was determined to see this through, not just for her career, but for the safety of every passenger who relied on the airline. Jessica Walker's decision to stand up for safety had sparked not just an investigation, but a nationwide conversation about the ethics of corporate responsibility, racial bias, and aviation standards. As the story unfolded and the media began to cover the FAA's inquiry into Skylink Airlines, Jessica found herself at the center of a public debate that would have far-reaching consequences for the aviation industry. What had initially started as an isolated incident, a first officer standing up to prevent a potential disaster, quickly evolved into a larger reckoning about the hidden costs of profit-driven decisions in a high-stakes industry. The media outlets covered the story extensively, shining a spotlight on Jessica's actions and the systemic issues within the airline. Public opinion was sharply divided. Some saw her as a hero, a brave whistleblower who refused to stay silent in the face of corporate negligence. Others, particularly some of her colleagues and skeptics in the industry, criticized her for airing the airline's dirty laundry, claiming she was jeopardizing the company's future and the jobs of many hard-working employees. Why didn't she handle it internally, some asked, while others accused her of dramatizing the situation. But despite the criticism, Jessica's courage garnered significant public support. Social media exploded with hashtags like #AviationHero and #SkylinkSafety, celebrating her for speaking truth to power and pushing back against an industry too focused on efficiency and profit margins. Many people recognized her story as a reflection of the larger struggle for racial and gender equality in traditionally male-dominated fields. It was clear that Jessica's actions resonated with a wider audience who saw in her a symbol of hope and change. The debate went beyond the confines of aviation. It became a part of the broader conversation about corporate ethics, workplace culture, and the importance of diversity and inclusion. People began questioning whether companies like Skylink Airlines were truly prioritizing the safety and well-being of their employees and passengers, or whether they were more concerned with cutting corners to maximize profits. Despite the backlash from some quarters, Jessica's resolve remained unshaken. She knew that the price of her actions could be high, but the impact of her efforts was undeniable. Her story was no longer just about one woman fighting for safety, it had become a turning point in an entire industry, demanding greater accountability and transparency. And, as the media continued to shine a light on the issues at Skylink, Jessica realized that her fight had sparked something much larger, a movement for a safer, more inclusive aviation industry. In the end, Jessica knew that the conversation her actions had started would not end with a single investigation. It was the beginning of an industry-wide shift, and she was proud to have played a key role in pushing that change forward. Despite the turmoil she had faced, Jessica Walker's unwavering commitment to safety and ethics eventually paid off in ways she hadn't anticipated. After months of public scrutiny, internal battles, and personal sacrifices, Jessica was promoted to captain at Skylink Airlines, a recognition of her exceptional skills, resilience, and courage in the face of adversity. The promotion was more than just a career milestone. It was a symbol of her victory over the prejudices and challenges that had once threatened to hold her back. It was the validation of everything she had fought for, not just her rightful place in the cockpit, but also the broader fight for safety, transparency, and inclusivity in aviation. The promotion, however, did not come without its complications. While many at Skylink acknowledged Jessica's capabilities and dedication, some of her colleagues still held grudges. Many had privately criticized her actions during the FAA investigation, believing she had jeopardized the airline's reputation. As the media continued to cover her story, a few of Jessica's co-workers continued to resent her for the disruption she had caused, even as they recognized her accomplishments. They whispered behind her back, and some even refused to work with her. The road to earning their respect would be long, but Jessica was determined to prove herself, not just as a captain, but as a leader in the industry. For Jessica, however, the promotion represented more than just a personal triumph. She had become a symbol of change, a beacon for the next generation of pilots, especially women and people of color, who had once felt that aviation was a field they could never break into. Her journey showed them that, no matter how tough the road, it was possible to push through barriers and challenge a system that had always favored others. Jessica's story became a rallying cry for those who believed that aviation, and the corporate world as a whole, needed to change. As she took to the skies in her new role, Jessica knew her legacy would extend far beyond her time with Skylink Airlines. The changes she had helped spark within the company were only the beginning. Her actions had ignited an ongoing conversation about safety, ethics, and diversity, one that was now taking root across the industry. More airlines would begin to look at their own policies, and safety would no longer be something that could be compromised for the sake of profits or efficiency. In her heart, Jessica knew that the path she had taken wasn't just about her, it was about paving the way for others. She had fought for the integrity of the airline, for the safety of passengers, and for the future of aviation as a whole. And in doing so, she had rewritten the narrative for all those who would follow in her footsteps. Her journey had just begun, and she was determined to continue flying high, leading by example. As the immediate aftermath of the investigation settled, Jessica Walker found herself in a unique position. Her career was on an upward trajectory, but the impact of her actions continued to ripple through the aviation industry. The revelations about Skylink Airline's systemic failures, particularly the falsification of maintenance records and the dangerous cost-cutting measures, had sparked national debates. The airline was under intense scrutiny from the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, and the media, and despite the company's attempts to downplay the situation, the damage had already been done. Skylink was now forced to confront its own shortcomings, and the aviation industry as a whole began to take a closer look at its own practices. For Jessica, the journey hadn't just been about surviving within a system that wasn't always welcoming, it had been about ensuring that future generations of pilots, especially women and people of color, wouldn't face the same barriers. Her battle had forced Skylink Airlines to rethink its culture, and changes had begun to take shape. Safety protocols were strengthened, and there was an increased focus on creating a more inclusive work environment. As Jessica flew the newly inspected planes under revised protocols, she could feel the weight of her efforts starting to pay off. However, the road to redemption for Skylink wasn't smooth. Some employees, bitter about the disruption caused by the investigation, still harbored resentment toward Jessica. Whispers of discontent lingered in the halls of the airline, and some blamed her for the upheaval, despite her efforts to bring about much-needed change. But Jessica had long since learned not to dwell on the opinions of those who couldn't see the bigger picture. She had done what was necessary, and now, the only thing that mattered was the work she was doing and the future she was helping to create. In the years that followed, Jessica's influence spread beyond Skylink. She became a sought-after speaker at industry conferences, universities, and advocacy groups. Her story was told in classrooms and boardrooms, inspiring countless aspiring pilots to chase their dreams despite the obstacles they might face. She spoke about the importance of rigorous safety standards, the dangers of corporate greed, and the need for diversity and inclusion in aviation. Jessica knew that her actions had not only changed the course of her own career, but had set a new standard for the industry. Her legacy was one of transformation, ensuring that the skies, once an exclusive domain, were now open to all who had the determination to fly.